Welcome back. Western states still dealing with a fallout caused by last year's devastating 3 million gallon toxic mine spill. It poisoned the water supply of thousands of people. A federal investigation blamed the EPA for the spill. Now the Senate Republicans are planning a field hearing next week. And for the first time in 12 years, the committee plans to subpoena the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Gina McCarthy, to appear at the hearing. Senator John Barrasso is calling the EPA response to the spill unacceptable. He joins us right now from Washington, D.C. Senator, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
You know, it's unbelievable. Gina McCarthy made a statement the other day, and I think it was something along the lines of, look, if the Republicans win the election, we're going to dig in bigger than ever before. But no mention of what happened in Flint, Michigan. No mention in terms of the EPA's performance and how, I mean, they just don't take responsibility for it.
No, they caused this spill. It has been devastating to the communities and the states involved. And then we're having this hearing next Friday, which is Earth Day. And instead, President Obama and Gina McCarthy want to be in New York to sign the agreement from the Paris climate deal when the EPA caused this poisoning of a river right here in the United States. It's completely irresponsible.
How did the EPA do it? Walk us through exactly what happened and what mistakes were made.
Well, it was a mine cleanup. They knew that there's this area that was under pressure, and yet the people working there, under the control of the EPA, caused the disaster. The spill occurred, and then they didn't notify people because this was not in an area where people would have actually seen it. That it was the communities downstream that weren't informed. The tribes were not informed extended periods of time. And you've seen the pictures, this mustard orange colored poisoned to the river. And this is the river with which people live, where their drinking water comes from, they're bathing, and toxic chemicals are there.
Yeah.
So you say,
in other words, right, we're looking at the pictures right now, actually, Senator, and it's disgusting, the pictures. And Dagan McDowell, in other words, they did this and then they tried to lie about it and hide it.
Right. Absolutely. And Senator, what do you want to happen from these hearings? What do you want the EPA to do about it? What kind of penalties do you want, or punishment, if you will?
Yeah, well, they've been irresponsible in a number of ways. Right now, we need to have testing to know how the water is at any given time so people can know when they can use it and when they can't use it. The EPA has been very slow with the monitoring, with the testing. They want to give you the results, not current time results, which is what people on the ground need. The EPA said we've taken responsibility. No one's been fired, no one's been punished, no one's been disciplined at all. They just want to kind of forget about this, whereas you know, Maria, if a private company had caused this spill, there would be all kinds of repercussions. The government would be all over them. So the government has this kind of a two-sided approach, what they need to do versus what a private company needs to do. It's a double standard, and it's wrong.
You're right.
This is an administration, and the EPA has gotten too big, too unaccountable, and they need to be held accountable. We want to know what they're going to do. The people in the area are very concerned right now because as the snow is melting, additional water is running in to the river, and it's churning up. Because these chemicals that have now been deposited, the poisons that have been deposited down in the riverbed, they're coming back up.
So here's Michael Block, Senator.
So what does this mean for the EPA? I mean, should the EPA be scrapped, replaced, cut down? Like, what should happen here? How much role should the private sector play in this? Even though in this case, this is not their ball here.
Well, I think the EPA has gone way beyond its original authority that when it came into place in the early 70s. In terms of issues where it was needed at the time. But they have become such a purifying agent in some ways and such a contaminating agent in others. They need to be held accountable. We have unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats in charge there. They're unresponsive. In this hearing, the reason that we had to do this subpoena is because they didn't want to show up. That's what to me is so offensive. They said, we'll send some written testimony. They were not willing to come and answer questions. We haven't had to issue a subpoena, and I will tell you, Maria, the subpoena was bipartisan by the members of the Indian Affairs Committee to say someone had to show up and answer questions. We haven't issued a subpoena from that committee since the days of Jack Abramoff and the criminal activities that were going on back then.
Unbelievable that you had to subpoena in order for them to show up. Meanwhile, they're out pointing fingers at private companies all the time. The EPA also getting a lot of scrutiny from the Republican candidates, by the way. EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy fired back. I mentioned this earlier. She said the agency will not go down without a fight if the GOP wins in November. Here's the quote, Senator. The EPA's rules get scrutinized like no other, says McCarthy. They would have to go to the same level of scrutiny by any president should there be a reverse in direction. What's your take on this, Senator?
Well, the EPA has been reinterpreting the laws, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, from years ago. What the EPA has been done now has nothing to do with current or new legislation. It's a reinterpretation of old laws, and that's what they're using to go after coal, to go after energy, to go after land use, water use in the country. They're waters of the United States. It's a land grab, essentially, where they're calling all of the waters, which primarily come under the control of the federal government if it's navigable water, but other waters are under the control of the states.
Right.
They want it all, which is a huge grab of authority and land control by the federal government, and specifically this EPA.
Senator, we'll be watching that meeting. Thanks very much. We will be watching after that subpoena. Senator John Barrasso, thanks so much for sharing this with us, and we'll see you soon, sir.
Thanks for having me.